Um, how have you been?
I have been doing all right. Just trying to get through life and get through this game and having a really good time in Secrets of Fedor. How about you?
Um, more or less the same. The last few weeks have been kind of bad. I've been struggling with the hot weather. SOF rating is great, compared to TBS, so that's been enjoyable. Feel like I've not talked with you in a while, and I think it's been because I already obtained almost everything I need, so I've not really been bidding much lately. So it's kind of weird. I was like, "Hey, what's Hop's been up to for a while?"
Yeah, it's been one of those like weird things. I hear like so many people being like, "I'm almost best in slot," and I have other people saying they don't have hardly any gear at all. So I'm always like, I don't know what the two different sides are doing. I guess people just need to bid more.
Yeah, I think people have. There's so many different gaming strategies around DKP. Obviously in SOF, I've been spending like crazy, and so I'm pretty low in terms of total banked DKP right now. And I see some other people that have like 3,000, 4,000, or even more DKP, and they have not spent any. And I look at their character, and I don't see that they've been buying gear elsewhere or getting it from plat raids. And I'm just thinking, what are you hoarding this DKP for? Are you expecting to retire off of it? Are you building a 401k? What are you doing?
Yeah, you always wonder, like, yeah, planning to invest, because all I saw, and like I used to be one of the offenders, like I used to have like 4K DKP, and all every week I was losing 50 to 100 DKP just from the decay, and I was like, why am I doing this to myself? So this expansion, I made myself spend, get lower. Uh, it took a little bit of that mindset change to be okay with it, but I'm much happier for it, and I think the gear, my gear level's much higher than it used to be, so that's probably a good thing too.
It's pretty important for a warrior too, I guess. It does seem like not only do a lot of people have different strategies with DKP, but the perspective of the actual person varies a lot as well. On Mischief, with everything being tradable, uh, there's a side aspect where a person will sometimes, want to spend DKP for their secondary characters, which is allowed, within certain parameters. And I know a lot of people will only pick up certain items for the main character that they know that they can pass down to the secondary characters at a later date, which, I mean, makes sense on that point. But ultimately, I think I do agree that people just need to spend a little bit more on occasion.
Yeah, some people, it's hard to say. Like I wish that people would spend more just in the sense of getting the gear, make our raids better, make it smoother, make everyone play better. But I also understand that some people enjoy that hoarding aspect and getting the deal. So I try to not let it affect how I feel, what other people do. The only time I question it is when there's been cases in the past where like a character will, a warrior say, will forego all his gear choices in favor of like saving up for that one weapon, and he'll wait a whole expansion for that one weapon rather than upgrading everything, and that doesn't help anyone. So as long as we avoid the extreme situation with that, I'm okay with people holding off a little bit, trying to get that deal, trying to sneak the things in if that's what they find fun.
Yeah, one of the main things I was kind of curious about, we were talking last week about how busy sometimes the DKP officer's job can be, and how sometimes it's not really visible to the main player base that are in the raid. What do you think you spend most of your time actually doing as a DKP officer when you're not actually playing on the raid? Like, what level of time and effort involvement actually is there?
I'll just kind of give like a rundown of what we do after a raid. So when the raid ends, we kind of compile our loot, make sure all of the DKP officers have their loot pages good. We combine them, and then one of us will start running the tool. After running the tool, which everyone knows the process of that because everyone participates in that, um, we have to take the results, sort them so that we can get them assigned to the right people to send out the loot. When you're doing this on a live server, any other server but Mischief or Verona Bay, um, Obviously, this doesn't matter because you're assigning the loot per boss, but here, just with the way we do it, there is normally 200 to 300 items a night that have to get all sorted and to make sure they go right. And one of the big things is that there's just always like just small little errors, like an item didn't go out, or a uh, like a the way the item's spelled, it just sorts differently on each list, and you really have to like watch it and make sure that you get everything right. Otherwise, you'll have like a night that we had that I still remember and fear to this day, where we sent basically 100 items out to the wrong people and had to get it all corrected, and it was a nightmare. So we try to avoid that at all costs, and that was like a lesson learned night. Um, After getting the loot sheet good and everyone has it, we start sending out the loot. I try to do it every night, but depending on what life is going on and what I have to do with work the next day, sometimes it has to wait till the next day. And sending that out normally takes like a good hour or so, just because of the amount of items and parceling and to make sure we do it right. So I would say, all in all, doing all that is about 2.5 extra hours after like a raid to get that all sorted, all done. And then, of course, there's the kind of the stuff throughout the day of DKP disputes and people just asking questions and kind of doing that thing. And so it just all adds up. So it's not. I always tell people, especially like we had Ryo Chan join the DKP team recently, and it's not a hard thing. It's just a tedious job, and it is a time commitment to be able to do that. Something that you have to just kind of bite the bullet and get it done.
Yeah, one of the things that is great about Mischief, since everything is tradable, well, since most things are tradable here, is that when you have an error, it's easy to fix. I've not played on a live server in quite a while, but I recall the annoyances of what happens when gear accidentally got assigned to the wrong person, because then you have to. I don't know if this has changed, but at the time you had to basically, have the person not loot it. Uh, Hopefully they didn't actually loot the item, and then wait for the corpse to time out, where you're normally accustomed to just going on to the next target. So the characters have to sit there, keeping the DZ open. Obviously the opportunity for a big catastrophe is possible, but I think the day by day experience is a lot better, especially for those of us in the actual guild, because in terms of our involvement in clearing targets, we spend a lot less time, of course. Um, with Ryo joining the DKP team, I guess one of my main questions that I think would be interesting to know is, does having more DKP officers make it easier once everyone knows what they're doing, or is that not really much of a factor so much?
Having more is definitely like a huge help. Not necessarily like in a situation where like doing the actual work, because we have lots of people that will step up and help us send out the items as long as they're not having to do the bulk of it. I mean, you hear me on raids always going, who's willing to take some loot? But what it helps with is after doing this for 2 years, or like Lopers, who's been doing it since Omens of War, and D-Mall, who's been doing it almost as long as I have. It just gets exhausting just kind of doing it every night. And it's just nice to be able to have like a night when you're not the person having to do the loot and having to bid it out and having to do the sheet. In the same way that it's nice for the excess, like if we ever have excess raid leaders, that someone can take a night off or not feel like if they don't show up that they're letting the guild down.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, I guess. So, one of our initial questions when we were talking, pre this conversation, was, what's in it for you? Why would a person want to be a DKP officer? Uh, what are some thoughts on that?
Uh, I'm going to be honest. I ask myself that every day. Why am I doing this? Why am I like? It is. There is no. Um, there is no benefit, like tangible, to doing this.
You
It
don't get a
is.
discount on items or anything at all?
No, no, no discount. In fact, I will tell you right now that there has been many cases where an item has gone missing, and all the officers actually chip in their plat to make it right, just because it's our mess up, and we don't want to have someone not get that piece of loot they're excited about. So, if anything, this has cost me a plat more than I've ever earned from it because I've earned exactly zero. Um, I think what I think originally I just wanted to do it to be able to help out. I remember it was like North Temple of Vashon, and so he was just looking for some people, and I was actually asked not to be an officer if I could just do loot and not be an officer, and he said I had to be one. So here we are, and I just wanted to help out because I see the amount of work that people are putting in, and it is a lot of work, and if I could help in any way, that's why I started. I would say I do it now. I kind of take pride in how well the system runs. We don't have big mistakes very often. Um, we don't have a lot of issues that you see in a lot of guilds. We don't have items going missing or people questioning the integrity. And there is actually like a time where I was taking a break, and it started going a little bit south. Like it just wasn't running up to standard, and I came back early from my break because I was like, no, 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 we got to get this shit back right. So I think to me, it's making sure that that whole system keeps running, and the people that I'm friends with and the people I enjoy playing with just get that kind of flawless, seamless experience. And hopefully, hopefully you guys get that, and hopefully you guys feel that it's done pretty well. And like DKP isn't something that you stress out. You might get angry or upset about other things, but hopefully not that one.
I will mention that obviously DKP officers are really good at parceling out items, but if 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 platinum were to ever accidentally be parceled to a DKP officer, it's not considered a rush fee, and it's not considered prioritization on sending out items. It's just a flat donation, and it's completely non-traceable, and the DKP officers absolutely don't even keep a record of who has been doing it. But all the power to those that wish to send a tip or a friendly note every once in a while, or even just just I love you guys, on occasion. I think um, a lot of that goes a long way to keeping people in good spirits. I would encourage anyone who's listening to this to love your DKP officers. They are by far the hardest working, lowest ranking members of the guild, and I'm glad that we have you guys. Um, one of the things that you were talking about a minute ago is, that one of the main goals is keeping DKP running smoothly, which makes a lot of sense. Um, as a just a regular member, obviously, I'm not a big fan of open DKP at all because we easily have the biggest roster of any guild that's currently rating and maybe even ever rating, for all I know. Um, Open DKP doesn't really seem well suited for that big of a roster bidding all at once. Do you think that there's a possibility that the the site improvements from Open DKP will ever actually be make that smoother?
I To be perfectly honest with you, I think what we have with OpenDKP is what it's going to be. I only say that because it seems like the guy who has been designing it, Monk, has kind of stepped away and is working on other projects. I know that Blastoff is constantly improving his site, and I know that him and Zaid talk a lot about it. I think if it ever gets to a point that it makes sense to Zaid that we swap over to that, it's something that may happen in the future. One of the biggest challenges we have is that we've been doing this open DKP for 2 years, and we still have people that don't do like the minimum upbid. They don't do the raid boxes right. Just like a lot of small things, and I think there is a concern that if we swap to an entirely new system, there would be a lot of turmoil with like we can't even handle like the basic thing we've been doing for 2 years. That's not a reason not to change, but it's just something we worry about. So, like I said, I think that's one of those things that that's a little bit above, like you said, I'm the lowly member of the guild, so that's a little bit above my pay grade of what we're using. But we do try to do our best with the system we have. Kind of like when we did raise those up bids to 20, it's because every night we were lagging the site with doing little measly one bids, and the 20 has helped a lot. Um, on a personal note, it would be, if you look at overall the performance wise of the site, while all the features may not be kind of what you're looking for, but the performance there is there almost every night. And the occasional night, kind of like the we had one this week that was a little bit rough, uh, is the rarity now instead of the regular. And so I just hope that everyone kind of keeps that in mind, that it's not, it goes pretty well most of the time, and occasionally it's going to hiccup, and that's okay. We'll get through it, and we get through it every time, and we're good to go. Um, but it's not just one of those things we just want to throw out the window just because we have one little rough night.
Yeah, I'm not really an expert so much on Blast Off's raid builder site because I very rarely am able to attend alt raids since I don't really have any alternate characters. Definitely agree. It's been improving a lot lately. I think the real problem with Blast Off's site, with the perspective of wanting to switch to it, is not that it couldn't do it because I think it easily could. The problem is it almost gives too much freedom to the bidder in that if a person doesn't know what they're doing, they can easily spend all their DKP on like one item, especially if they're using the auto bidder and they make a typo. I mean, how many times have we seen a bid in real time where somebody puts in 45,000 DKP? And obviously we can see that in real time and correct for it. But Belastov's site, the bids go pretty pretty fast. And even as a person who has used it several times, um, sometimes I am surprised that an item is finished out because I didn't have that 1 minute to even look at it. So it's not perfect, but I also recognize that with OpenDKP, we've got 2 years worth, I think, not quite 2 years worth of history on the actual site in terms of just that data from an archive perspective. Obviously there's really no way to import that over to any other alternative, but there's merit to keeping the current database that we have. As far as I'm aware, every guild that I've ever been in has never changed something so integral to what the guild does, um, ever. Unless they had to. Obviously, with a guild running a live that's been in existence for 5 or 10 years, something has to change at some point. But it's never because they want something new and shiny. It's because something doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, I think people, I mean, everywhere, work, life, DQ, no one really likes change for the most part. Um, like on a personal note, it will never happen, but like I would love closed bidding, and I've kind of jokingly advocated it for it a little bit, and I understand like a lot of people don't like it, they don't trust it. Just from using the site, I think it'd be amazing. I could put all the loot up, go to bed, wake up, do the bid. Like we could leave it up for hours, let people do their thing. Um, it's just one of those things that there's reasons to stick with something and reasons to change things, and you have all sorts of people. Like some people love the competition of like trying to get those deals, kind of like we talked about earlier, or trying to see if they can push someone up and kind of be mean to them, make them go up a little bit higher on an item. I personally don't like that, but some people do. So you're always going to have people that want to advocate for the changes, or people that want it to stay. And like you said, I really think it comes down to that when you make a big change like that, it has to come more from necessity than just like wanting to try something new. Because if the need isn't there, a lot of people won't understand why you're doing it.
Not to mention that, having to teach the entire guild how to do something so integral at one particular time, that sounds like a nightmare. I definitely remember, some of those upbids from. This was especially problematic during the Velius era when like Cassiera and a couple other people like made a game out of bidding up by one, and like everybody was kind of egging them on, and to their to insult them, it actually I think made them want to do it more, which was really annoying because they're literally wasting the guild's time when it was 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes.
Yeah, it, it was definitely a waste of time. I will admit that like the first few times it happened, it was kind of funny in the sense of like, oh my god, they've been going for 20 minutes, and then
Right.
eventually it was like, oh my god, I want to go to bed. Uh, and that is, I'm sure people have seen me being guild chat like bid like you mean it. I'm going to close this auction in 3 minutes. I don't care if you're done bidding or not. Like, it's mainly because if you're sitting there just keep up bidding like by the minimum amount and it's dragging out for minutes, there's a person that's trying to go to work the next day and needs to get out of here, and I that's one of those reasons why I like just the last question I was advocating for closed bidding because that wouldn't happen. You just have your one bid and you're done. Um, but it is okay when something is going. I understand that lots of people are bidding and they don't want to pay extra DKP. So I try to remember that it isn't all about hops going to bed. There's also people try to enjoy the game, and but yeah, those days during loose lin, luck lin, whatever you call it, however you want to say it, is were some dark times, and they led to that site lagging so bad. So I'm glad we got past the lagging side, and for the most part, got past the extremely long bids.
Yeah, I only ever actually was in a um, quasi officer role once for a brief period of time in Agnar. I was not an officer, but I was. We had this stupid thing called class leads, which I think is a dumb idea. But as a class lead, on occasion would take tells for loot. And on Agnar, we were, I think it's called closed bidding, where the the winner pays second second price plus one. There's probably a term for it, but I forget. And I didn't, not being an officer, I wasn't, doing it as commonly, but it always seemed like, I knew the tells I was getting that I was awarding the items out, correctly, but you could definitely kind of feel that there's a little bit of gamesmanship there where people always just, I'm rambling here.
I know what you're trying to say. It's kind of like it's almost like a meta within like the
Yeah,
bidding system. Like you know, Ravanta is always going to bid 100, and that's just his bid. So you're going to bid 101 every time, so you never lose to him. Or you know that this person's going to go all in because they really want that item, so you kind of do a pretty high one just to kind of screw them over. Like there's lots of gamemanship when it comes to like the closed bidding, that is kind of negative and toxic. There's I don't think in a system where anyone's like kind of doing a bidding, unless it was like a set price for everyone, I think there's always going to be those ways to game the system and kind of get at people if that's what you're trying to do. I will say that I am very happy that probably for the most part, I would say 95, 99% of the people in this guild are not about that. And it really, I really do appreciate that because I think that as a guild we're just such a good team, and for the most part we get along. Maybe not all the time, but we get along enough to get the raids and get stuff done. And it just, I would say that environment is what one of those reasons I keep playing after all this time.
Yeah, like at Agnar, for example, collaboration was pretty common where people of the same class would basically just agree to not bid on an item, and they would basically just, kind of take turns. And, there's a little bit of that going on, with our system. But I've even seen, personally, seen tells from people where they mentioned that they wanted a certain item, but they did not bid on it because they didn't want to upbid someone else, which I think is a completely, you know, benevolent, matter because, obviously they would rather their guildmate get the item than 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 them, which that's great. Obviously that's a positive thing, but I honestly kind of think that open DKP being open like it is it almost encourages that, and I don't know how many times I've thought this. I mean, everyone knows I bid 69 as much as possible. It feels like because there's people that are joining, like Hearsay, for example, has been doing it as well, and it feels like people are respecting it, and they will not be as likely to bid over because they want to support the idea of 69 bids winning. And I have to say, it's been fun. You know, that's my one little game that that I play with DKP, just because I think it's fun.
Yeah, I think I don't have to go against you very often just because you're a caster and I'm the plate class. But we had that shroom illusion,
Yeah.
and I remember you bid. I forget what the bids were, but like I played the game. Like I was willing to pay it, but I was going to play the game. So I think I bid like 1420 or something, and you went above it with a like a 1769 or something. But yeah, no, I definitely feel like there's just some people like you said, like you. Um, I feel like if I'm going to bid against you, I got to play by your rules.
Well, I kind of had that played out for a real long time. I had the record for the highest DKP spent on an item, which was the first a 10 necklace from Luckland, and which obviously from a DKP budget standpoint was a really stupid thing, of course, because considering how common they were. But you know, just like with the Shroom illusion, I wanted the first one that we got, and that's just how it was. And wanting the first one of an item means you just have to pay more, and I embrace that. But I do think the game was fun, especially like with the Shroom Illusion. I think it went over 2,000, and I raised my bid to, I think it might have even been 2,000, and then you bid 2,049, and it's like you were telling me what to do, and I was like, okay, Hops, I hear this. And 2069 it was, and obviously that's what I went for. I almost kind of wish I would have bid higher, because again, having the highest record for an item spent was fun. I don't know if I'll ever be able to do that again. And the only reason why I did it in Luckland was because of all those midnight raids, killing Wushi however many times. I just had a lot of DKP left over.
Yeah, those were crazy times. Gonna get like way more DKP from just being awake at 4 a.m. than you did during normal raids. I think not quite a game, but I'll just go ahead and share kind of my funniest just moment with bidding. And it was Omens of War launch. It was Symbol of the Overseer. And Greywalk and I were both like, this is our item. And we were in a little bidding war going back and forth, and it gets up to about 800, which for me and Greywalk at the time, that was unheard of. We didn't bid that much DKP. And I looked at the item and I realized that that item was on my sheet, but it wasn't the item that I thought it was, and I would have never bid that much. And I just quietly backed out. At the end, I was like, I'm sorry, but I bid you up and I thought it was a different item, but I can't go back and take it back because we played the game. And I ended up accidentally ripping off probably about 500, 600 DKP on that item. It was, we got a good kick out of it. He was a good sport, but it was still one of those moments where I was like, oops.
Well, you live by the sword, you die by it. I definitely have done something similar like that myself. I definitely follow just a list at this point, especially now that we have so many expansions coming up that are 3 months in a row, or 3 months unlocked instead of 2 months. So that's a little bit easier to do. I kind of hate expansion unlocks. Obviously, it's exciting. You can raid new content and new gear, new spells, but it's just so much work all the time.
It absolutely is a lot of work, and I am not competitive in the slightest. I just like having fun. So the late nights and all the test raids for me are not my cup of tea. But it is the charge of the guild and one of our goals. So obviously we go with it. Um, it definitely is one of those stressful this times. I do like getting the new content. I do like doing the new group stuff, and I love like especially. I think one of my favorite moments was the TBS groups and us kind of all racing against each other to get into that first raid. I thought
Yeah.
that was a lot of fun. Um, so there's I think the positives outweigh the negatives I have for it.
Yeah, that's for TBS launch. My group practiced that quite a bit actually, and I felt in some respects that I was kind of the odd man out. The roles that my class brought to those missions. There were ways I could personally contribute, but it did kind of feel like if I was a different class, I could have been more overall productive to the group. But having said that, we still did pretty great. I think my group was like, in terms of the guild, I think we were the fourth group in the raid, maybe the fifth, and we executed perfectly. On live when it unlocked, we had our best clear that we ever had from practice, which always feels really great. But I was still nervous. It was wild. I do wish that TBS as an expansion, could maintain that level of that kind of fun. But in terms of the actual unlock night, it was great because it was relatively quick. Like TSS, not TSS, but SOF, for example, 16 hours. I don't know how many times I fell asleep in my chair that night.
Yeah, it was TSS was rough. I think the roughest launch as a guild was probably Planes of Power, and I know
Yeah.
that we didn't do much testing for it, but we did. We had like the officers planning it, and I think we had planned to clear it by day 3, and at that time it was Wednesday, so that would have been Friday. We would have cleared it, and I know I know at Sunday one of the officers came into like the officer channel was like, my wife is on the couch crying because she doesn't know when she'll see me again. And it
Oh
was
my God.
it was that was a rough, very long launch. The awesome thing about it was that it was a launch that we really focused, and one of the reasons it went so long is because we wanted everyone to be involved. So instead of just doing one group rushing it through, we flagged the whole guild almost pretty much as we could with the numbers we had, and pushed as many through as possible that week as we could. Um, so it was amazing just to see everyone getting to experience it and get to do it as a guild as a whole.
Yeah, I always kind of thought that, and maybe this was even said, but and this is just still my opinion. It felt like, the decision with Planes of Power to focus on splitting it first, than just killing Quorum first, almost felt like it was because would have been easier to not have to reject so many people from being in the first clear of quorum, because there's always this big level of prestige that comes with being in the guild that first clears something on an unlock on LTOP. But even within the own guild, being the person that is in that first raid, even if you're not the first, which for Planes of Power we weren't. But I wonder if the decision to try and split it first was primarily just because we wanted to um, mitigate some drama from having to turn so many people away internally from being in the first raid, just because our roster was large enough to where everyone that wanted to be in the first clear would not have been able to.
Oh, it was absolutely that reason, and also it's one of the few expansions. I can't think of many more. There's like a one or two zones maybe, but that expansion there's so many zones locked behind the raid. So if we left people behind, they would have been stuck doing the tier 1, tier 2 zones for like a whole week. And instead we had everyone doing fire on night 1, which was amazing. So we just didn't want anyone to get to the point where they were um, feeling left out, feeling left behind, feeling dejected. Um, it was the right call in hindsight, absolutely, because I think that if we had done it differently and people hadn't been able to get in and be part of that fun, um, I honestly think we probably would have taken a hit with how many people we would have lost and things like that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that point. Um, going back to just in terms of being a DKP officer in the guild itself, since you have to spend a good amount of time, you know, messing with loot and getting loot posted out and that sort of thing, and you know, working on the site while bids are going out. Does that kind of limit your playtime for actually enjoying EverQuest for doing things that you want to do, or is it just more time that you're playing EverQuest?
I think it does. It does limit the time some. It, in kind of a few, like I can give you a few examples. Like a lot of times after raids, that's when like swarm up, and that's when people go off to go do stuff. So by the time the tool and the sheet's done, everyone has either got the group and they're doing their thing and they don't need anyone else, or people have gone to bed, and you kind of miss the opportunity. Um, when it comes to like even just the bidding, like there's a lot of times where people are like, "Can you delete this item bid?" or "Can you delete this bid?" or I someone else is doing something and we need you to check it out. And like there's a lot of times where like I don't even look at the loot that's going out, even though I may want to bid on it. Um, I I think that there is also just sometimes I'm like I just had to send out 100 items in the parcel. I'm done, and I get off. I do think that it does kind of change your play style, especially for someone like me. That I definitely try to keep a life EQ balance going on, where I'm not always on this game as much as I love it and as much as I could. So I kind of will plan around that and use that time doing this rather than time that I would actually use playing. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just one of the ways it is, and that's kind of like one of those reasons where like a few more DKP officers could actually help, because if I wasn't having to do the tool or having to send out the things or do the sheet, um, my night would be free that night, and I can kind of go enjoy those things.
That makes a lot of sense. What kind of person do you think would make the best DKP recruit?
Probably someone neurodivergent that loves numbers and can do repetitive tasks over and over again and really enjoy it, such as myself. Um, it is definitely one of those things. I said it earlier, and I say to everyone, it's not hard. It's just very meticulous, kind of tedious, and um, you have to be okay with it's going to take you a minute to loot the things off the sheet or loot the things off the boss, get it on the sheet after every boss. And like, there's a reason why I'm not topping parses, and it has nothing to do with DKP. It's because I'm a bad player, but the DKP doesn't help. Um, so anyone that wants to help out in a kind of a thankless role, you do get the camaraderie with the fellow officers in the DKP team, which is a big thing. It's probably the reason, one of the main reasons I keep logging in, just because you kind of have that little support group kind of going through this. Um, but if you have that desire or drive to kind of be something like a bigger piece of the wheel or the cog, or to kind of see how it works behind, and you just want to help people out, like it would definitely be a good role.
What's what kind of closing thoughts would you want to have? Um, would you want to offer to the topic of the DKP team or anyone thinking about wanting to maybe join it?
I think if you are interested in doing DKP or helping out with that, or recruiting, um, or raid leading, any officer role, I think it's definitely worth reaching out. Um, there's so many factors that go into deciding who will be a new officer, that don't get offended if they say no. I'll tell you that I was told no initially, and I was the second choice that got brought in as like, all right, we're going to give this guy a shot, and here I am 2 years later, almost still doing it. Um, it's just, if you have any desire to help, if you have any desire to kind of help this machine that we are keep moving forward, keep rolling. If you're just looking for a way to get to know people better, because everyone's going to talk to you and everyone's going to ask you questions, or things like that. There's a lot of reasons why someone would become an officer. If you're looking for any type of thanks, it's very rare. If you're looking for something that's easy, definitely don't do it. If you think you're going to get some tangible reward out of it, don't do it. This is absolutely like one of those truly volunteer, selfless sacrifice type things, and I don't say that in a negative way. You'll definitely feel positive and rewarded from doing it, and that's the type of person that would be great in this role.
Well, I feel that it's especially on Mischief, like the one of the main reasons why people keep logging in is because they like the ability to get more loot for their character or for their alts. And obviously, without the DKP team, the guild literally would not function. Um, so I definitely say in jest uh, that they are the lowest ranking officers. Well, they technically might be in some respects, or the lowest ranking members of the guild, I should say. We all know that that is a completely tongue-in-cheek thing, and you know, from the class of member, I do think, even though we are pretty appreciative of it, guys, I think that on occasion we should, be a little more mindful of the large amount of time you guys do spend outside the guild. I'm sure, you know, doing those kind of tasks is not fun, and I do want to thank you for the conversation and thank you for all that you do.